Hi, Liz. How are you?
I'm good. How are you this morning?
Hanging in there, I think.
I'm sure you're the busiest man in America, it seems like.
Something like that.
Dr. Fauci and the rest of the coronavirus task force know that people are feeling COVID fatigue in America, but they keep sounding the alarm on the spiraling cases, crazy high positivity rates, and the risk this winter. Dr. Fauci, the US has recently hit 10 million coronavirus cases. We're seeing them surge in certain parts of the country right now. How much worse is this going to get in the next few weeks? And how concerned are you? How concerned should Americans be?
Well, I'm actually quite concerned. This is a difficult place that we're in right now. As you mentioned, we have 10 million cases. We have over 240,000 deaths. And over the last few days, we've seen record-breaking numbers of cases per day, 140,000 a day, 60,000 hospitalizations, well over 1,000 deaths for several days in a row now. And that makes it much more difficult because what we're doing right now is that we are in the middle of the fall season with cool weather. As the weather gets even colder as we get into the winter, as we get into the holiday season, where you would expect people to travel and families to congregate indoors for understandable traditional dinners and social gatherings, that could make things much worse. So for that reason, we really need to double down on the fundamental public health measures that we know can mitigate against this. And you know them, they're very simple. The universal wearing of masks, the avoiding crowded and congregate settings, physical distance, doing things. I know it's more difficult now with the cool weather, but to the extent possible, doing things outdoors, preferentially over indoors, and washing of hands. They seem so simple in such an ominous situation you're in, but they do work. We know that they do, and we've got to make sure people don't think that we're saying lockdown again, because there's such COVID fatigue that when you talk about that, people have no appetite for that. But on the other hand, you can't just do business as usual. We've got to uniformly adhere to those public health measures that will be able to get us through this. And the important issue, finally, is that vaccines are here. They are literally here. And I always say help is on the way. And the reason I think that's important to stress to the American public is that we need to hang in there a bit longer. We can't say that there's no end to this, so why do anything? It's going to be indefinite. It's not. Vaccines, which will be available to being distributed in December, and as we get into January, February, March, April, May, more and more people, including the general population after several months, will be able to be vaccinated. That means that we can get an end to this. So please, everybody, hang on, do the kinds of things that are the public health measures, because we will be able to end this. Even though, as you started off by asking me, Liz, we are in a very precarious situation now. We can't run away from that. We can't deny that. But there's something we can do about it.
Dr. Fauci, you told 60 Minutes last month about a national lockdown that you wouldn't advocate for that unless it, quote, it would have to get really, really bad. Are we at that moment where it's really bad? Do you think a partial lockdown is something this country might need to do?
Well, you know, it depends on what you mean by lockdown. You can stop a number of things that are really the vulnerable aspects of getting more and more cases. You know, congregate settings indoors, the kinds of things that we talk about that are short of closing all the shops, closing the bars, making sure people don't congregate in settings indoor, warning people that even the innocent conduct of having a family gathering where people go to an airport, get off, come in, don't have time to get tested, don't have time to get quarantined. You look at what the vulnerability is in a family setting, because as a matter of fact, as interesting as this may be and unusual, you intuitively may not have predicted it. But what we're seeing now is some of the drivers of the outbreak is less people necessarily going in a bar than family gatherings or a few friends, a dinner party of 8 to 10 people where you have people who feel, because they know everybody in the room, that we're okay. Nobody is feeling sick, so we're okay. Be careful, because the asymptomatic spread by people who have no idea that they're infected is why we're seeing a lot more. Not the only reason, but certainly it's contributing to it. So yes, we always have to keep the issue of lockdown on the table, but I don't think we need to go there right now. I think we can mitigate against this short of locking down.
You mentioned 240,000 Americans that we've lost to this coronavirus. When you look at that and how that stacks up to other countries around the world, have we failed in the United States?
I don't want to use the word fail, because that has so many connotations that get soundbite to death. And I don't want to do that. That's not helpful. I mean, we are in a very difficult situation. If you look at Europe right now, they are really getting hit badly also. So, I was just on a discussion with some of my international colleagues, and they are bemoaning the fact that in the countries in Europe, in the UK, they're getting hit as badly as we are right now.
When you look at how politicized the messaging around coronavirus has become, because it has, and you've talked about this before, do you feel that somehow the task force has failed? Do you feel any personal responsibility for this?
And again, I'm not going to be using words failure. They have too many charged connotations to it, and I'm not going to go there. The task force right now, we had a meeting this week. We're going to have another one before the end of the week. We have the people on the task force, particularly the medical people, who are out there doing what I'm doing with you right now. In addition, the science is sound. It doesn't get a lot of the PR that you get out when you talk about public health. But if you look at what's going on right now, we have vaccines that we're going to be deploying literally next month. People are going to start getting vaccines, healthcare workers and vulnerable people, such as those who have underlying conditions. And as we get into next year, that's going to happen. We have more and more favorable information about antiviral type approaches, namely how you attack the virus or how you treat people who are infected, anything from advanced disease to early disease. So there are a lot of things that are going on right now that I think we need to point out. I mean, obviously, we're in a very charged environment. To deny that we're in a polarized environment means that you haven't awakened this morning and see what's going on. But it is what it is. We need to just push ahead and do the best we can in the environment that we're in.
Let's talk about this Pfizer vaccine, because that was a huge piece of news that we got earlier this week. What we've seen so far about this is early data. Are you convinced that it will be effective?
Yes, I am, Liz. In fact, I've been dealing with vaccinology now for the over 35 years, for the 36 years that I've been director of this institute, which is primarily responsible for a lot of the research that goes into the development of vaccines. If you look at that and the number of cases that they had 94 cases. By the end of the data collecting, they will likely have many more, probably closer to 160 or more. But if you look at the distribution of the cases that were in the placebo group and the cases that were in the vaccine group, it was striking. I mean, that is a very impressive result. More than 90% effective is very, very impressive.
There's some skepticism, as you know, around vaccines, especially this one. How secure can people be about the safety of it when it's released?
Yeah. Well, obviously, safety is always paramount when you're dealing with a vaccine, because unlike treatments that you're giving to someone who is already ill, a vaccine you give to hundreds of millions of people who are well. So the paramount thing that you look at is safety. Obviously, you want a high degree of efficacy. Thankfully, with this vaccine, we have it. And likely with vaccines that will be coming along in the next weeks to months, we hopefully will see the same sort of high degree of efficacy. But built into every trial is a high degree of attention to safety. You have a data and safety monitoring board that looks at the data in real time. And when you see anything that resembles what we call a safety signal, like a red flag that goes up. That's the kind of thing that we know helps protect people in the arena of safety. In fact, you probably remember, Liz, that in several of the vaccine trials, there was a temporary pause because something happened that turned out to not necessarily be related to the vaccine, but the process was careful enough to say, wait a minute, we don't want to go any further until we investigate that. So I think when you see those kinds of things, that should add comfort that the people and the process that's doing the vaccine trial is extremely attentive to safety.
When will you get the vaccine?
Well, I mean, as soon as it's available to the people in my category. I mean, I will look at the data. I'm a scientist, so I will look at the data. I have a great deal of confidence in the career scientists at the FDA and at the advisory committees to the commissioner of FDA who will look at the data, at the Data and Safety Monitoring Board. And if this vaccine gets approved by the FDA, I will want it and I will take it in the turn that is available to me in my category.
How do you define success of this vaccine from an epidemiological perspective? What does that look like?
That's a great question, Liz. That's a really important question. I mean, there are multiple aspects to vaccine. There's the impact it's going to have on the individual. Will it protect you? Will it protect me? And then there's the broader issue. What does it do to the epidemiological aspect of the outbreak? Will you be able to get it from going to a pandemic to something that is an outbreak, to something that is indolent, to something that is very well controlled? And the end game of a vaccine is to end this as a pandemic epidemiologically and to bring the level of infection in the community so low that it actually does not interfere with the normal interactions that you have in society. That's the end game of this.
When do you think we'll return to some semblance of normalcy? For example, when will we be able to stop wearing masks?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I don't think we should ever, when we're dealing with respiratory seasons and influenza, we should consider that maybe, as many of the Asian countries, even if we, and I think we will be, highly successful in controlling this, should we completely abandon the issue of masks? I don't mean that everybody's got to walk around with a mask every minute of the day, but in the middle of a respiratory outbreak, you might want to consider beyond COVID that we might want to use masks more. But that's not really your question. Your question is, when are we going to get back to normal? And, you know, that's going to be a gradual process. I've said many times in the past that the vaccine as a tool to get back to normal will be as effective for two factors. One, how effective is the vaccine and how many people are going to take it? Because let's say we have, which we will, multiple vaccines that are 90+% effective. That's really good news. That only gets implemented successfully if many, many people take the vaccine. So, you know, there's somewhat of an anti-science, anti-vax feeling in this country. What I'm hoping for is that when people realize how effective this vaccine is, that there will be much more enthusiasm on the part of the general public to take it. So if you take a 95% effective vaccine and you couple it with the overwhelming majority of the people take the vaccine, like if 80, 90% of the population take the vaccine, we could get back to normal in this country. That doesn't mean pulling back on all public health measures. That means you still have to have some element of public health measures attention. I think we can do that by the end of the year. I do. I think that as we get to, you know, the third and fourth quarter of this year, if we have good uptake of the vaccine, I think we can get there by the end of this year.
Wow.
By the way, this year being 2021.
Right. Okay, yes.
Okay, not 2020.
2020 is over. It's a wash.
20 is, forget 2020. It's been a bad year.
Quickly on the holidays, what has you more worried, Thanksgiving or Black Friday?
They both have me worried, Liz. I don't think I could quantify one more than the other. I just think, family gatherings of people who travel from out of town, maybe spending time in a crowded airport, and then don't have time to either get tested or quarantine, and then sit around a table, which you usually see of, a Thanksgiving feast with maybe 15, 20 people from a family getting together. We need to make some serious decisions about the risks we're willing to take with our family, with people who are elderly, with people who might have underlying conditions. I don't want to be the Grinch that says don't have Thanksgiving, but I really think each family has to individually assess and determine the risk-benefit ratio of getting together in a big family gathering. I can tell you myself, not that everybody has to do what I do, but as a single example of an option, I have 3 adult daughters at different parts of the country. I would love to see my daughters. I adore them. But the fact is, they themselves are very reluctant to make that trip because they live in multiple different parts of the country because they're concerned about their father, i.e. me. They're concerned that they may be inadvertently infected without any symptoms, come into the house, not have time to get tested, not have time to quarantine. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we had Thanksgiving last year. We're almost certainly going to have Thanksgiving together next year. Maybe we want to call a timeout this time and not have a big family gathering. Not every family needs to do that. It's an individual choice, but it's something we should think about.
Dr. Fauci, have you spoken with President-elect Biden or his team?
No, I have not. Not since the election. I know those people, they're part of the scientific community. His team I've known for decades. So, it isn't that I haven't spoken, but I haven't spoken since the election, since the election process, right?
Have you seen his coronavirus plan, and do you have any thoughts on it?
I don't want to comment on that because that will be taken out of context. I can tell you that the people that he's putting together are people that I know that are highly qualified. Anyone who looks at their qualifications know that they are highly qualified. And I know them all. This is a public health scientific community that we've been colleagues for years and years. So I obviously know them quite well.
Sure. And final question to you, we're getting the wrap. Looking back on your relationship with President Trump and how much attention it's been given throughout the last few months, do you have any regrets on the way that you've approached him? And do you think that anyone could have gotten through to him about this pandemic?
I don't have any regrets. We actually have a much better relationship than people think, from the outside. Obviously we have situations in which I have said one thing and it's not necessarily been exactly, but in general, the relationship really has been good. And I think that's something that's not been fully appreciated.
Has he led by example? Do you think he has not worn masks? I saw him yesterday not wearing masks.
You're getting into things that I'm not going to comment on, Liz. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. Good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.